On a rain-lashed rooftop in New York, Silas's elite mercenaries lay scattered across the ground. Maya, clad in a rain-soaked red evening gown, pressed a loaded silver Glock into my hand. She leaned in close to my ear, her warm breath carrying a lethal seduction. "Axel, the last bullet belongs to you. Together, we end this old era." Welcome to Apex System, an exciting story is about to begin. Just a second ago, I was lying on the freezing concrete floor of a maximum security prison, feeling the searing agony of a rusted, makeshift shiv piercing my lung. The assassin hired by that bastard Silas Montgomery stood before me, laughing with arrogant derision. The next second, a gust of cold wind, carrying the stench of sour pizza and cheap cologne, slammed into my nostrils. With a dull thud, my back collided heavily with a rough red brick wall, the coarse texture scraping painfully against my skin. I snapped my eyes open, gasping for air, instinctively reaching to cover my bleeding wound, only to find myself wearing a faded gray hoodie, my chest completely intact. "Hey! Axel, have you lost your damn mind? I'm talking to you!" An incredibly arrogant voice exploded in my ear. I looked up, my vision gradually coming into focus. Standing before me was a guy nearly 6'3", built like an under-evolved grizzly bear. He was wearing an Oak Ridge High crimson varsity jacket, one thick arm tightly bunching up my collar. Brody Carmichael. Our high school star football player, and a brainless bully whose gray matter was smoother than a bowling ball. This wasn't prison. This was the foul-smelling dead-end alley behind the high school building. I have been reborn. God not only allowed me to come back to life with the blood and tear-soaked memories of my past life, but also sent me back to my senior year of high school, back to a time before any of the tragedies had begun. Seeing no reaction from me, Brody assumed I was paralyzed with fear just like before. He spat on the ground with a smirk and said viciously, "Listen, nerd. You better have my homework finished and hand it to me by tomorrow morning. And you'd better have $200 ready as compensation for zoning out just now. Otherwise, I'm stuffing your head into that trash can." The two lackeys standing behind him immediately erupted into a chorus of nauseating laughter. If this were the Axel of my previous life, he would probably be trembling and reaching for his wallet by now. But after enduring Silas's betrayal and surviving those dark, sunless days in prison, where every day was a fight for survival against all kinds of vicious thugs, the Brody standing before me didn't even qualify as a warm-up punching bag. Just as I was about to teach this stupid bear a lesson, a clear notification sound suddenly rang out deep within my brain without warning. This sound didn't come through my ears, but echoed directly within my neural center. Tactical system bound. Apex tactical radar activated, scanning for surrounding threat sources. Immediately following that, my field of vision underwent a world-shaking transformation. A layer of pale blue holographic light screen, visible only to me, overlaid itself onto my retinas. Bright red outlines were instantly marked around Brody and his two lackeys. The system not only labeled their height and weight but also placed highlighted lethal weakness markers on their chins, livers, knee joints, and other vulnerable areas. I could even clearly see the contraction patterns of Brody's muscle fibers. A red dashed line extended from his right arm, pointing directly at my left cheek. System prompt: hostile action detected. A right hook is expected in 1.5 seconds. Recommendation: duck to the right to evade, and counterattack below the left ribs. It was exactly like playing a real-life game with wall hacks and auto-aim enabled. "Axel, are you even listening to me?" Brody completely lost his patience. He released my collar and swung his massive right fist, which came whistling toward my face with a fierce gust of wind. Everything aligned perfectly with the system's predicted trajectory. In my eyes, the explosive power he took such pride in was so slow it felt like watching a video in slow motion. I tilted my head slightly to the right with nonchalant ease. Brody's fist swung past, nearly grazing the tip of my nose, before slamming heavily into the brick wall behind me with a sickening thud. "Ack! My hand!" Brody let out a pig-like squeal, clutching his knuckles as he stumbled backward. "Brody, I guess you only work on your muscles at the gym and forget to train your brain, don't you?" I sneered, my body lunging forward like a hunting leopard. In my system's field of vision, the highlighted area beneath his left ribs was flashing. Without hesitation, I tightened my core, and my right fist became a blur, striking his liver with pinpoint precision. Bang! The sound of the punch was low and dull. Brody's massive, nearly 200-pound frame suddenly froze. His eyes bulged, the color drained from his face instantly, and he couldn't even let out a scream. Like a heap of wet mud, his knees buckled, and he collapsed with a heavy thud into the waterlogged alley, clutching his stomach tightly and retching up bile. "Damn it! This kid is crazy! Get him!" Seeing this, the other two lackeys cursed and lunged at me from both sides. System notification: the target on the left has an unstable center of gravity. The target on the right is holding a sharp metal object. I didn't even need to look back. I launched a kick, landing it precisely on the inside of the left lackey's knee. With a sharp crack of bone, the man screamed and collapsed onto the trash cans. Immediately after, I spun around with the momentum, my left hand darting out like lightning to seize the wrist of the right lackey who was trying to pull a switchblade, snapping it downward with force. Clang! The switchblade hit the ground. I followed through by raising my right elbow and slamming it hard into his chin, sending his eyes rolling back as he blacked out instantly. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. The three men who had been so overbearing just moments ago were now all lying on the ground, groaning in agony. I cracked my neck, my joints making a crisp snapping sound. I walked over to Brody, who was still dry heaving, and slowly crouched down. I grabbed a handful of his hair, forcing him to lift his face, which was now contorted in pain. Brody, listen closely. From today on, I don't owe you any homework, and I don't owe you a single cent. I patted his cold, sweat-drenched cheek, speaking in a voice that was calm yet utterly chilling. If you ever dare show your face in front of me again, the next thing to break won't be your pride, it'll be your bones. Do you understand? Brody stared at me in terror, as if looking at a demon that had just crawled out of hell, and nodded his head frantically. I let go, stood up, and picked up my slightly worn backpack from the ground, casually slinging it over my shoulder. As the system notification announced the threat had been neutralized, the pale blue light screen gradually faded away. I took a deep breath of the fresh air blowing in from outside the alley and strode out of the dark corner. Silas Montgomery, you bloodsucker hiding in your Wall Street penthouse, enjoy your final days of luxury while you can. In this life, I will take back everything that belongs to you, with interest. The hallways of Oak Ridge High were filled with the shrill ring of the dismissal bell and the boisterous chatter of students. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt lower, avoiding the idle stares as I headed straight for the library. Taking care of Brody was nothing more than clearing a bit of roadside trash. My true enemy was Silas Montgomery, the future Wall Street tyrant who would one day control hundreds of billions in capital and crush me like a bug in a prison cell. To topple him in the arena of capital, what I lacked most right now wasn't muscle, but an admission ticket. And that ticket was currently sitting in the quietest corner at the very back of the library, right by the window. Maya Sterling. In my previous life, she was the ice queen of our high school and the sole heir to the Sterling family, a top-tier investment conglomerate in New York. Back then, I was insecure and withdrawn. I rejected her occasional gestures of kindness out of classmate camaraderie, as if avoiding a plague. Ultimately, I became a completely isolated pawn, left entirely at the mercy of Silas. This time, absolutely not. I came to a halt, my gaze locking onto her through several rows of tall bookshelves. She was wearing a well-tailored beige cashmere sweater, her long blonde hair casually tied back. She was staring intently at a silver laptop in front of her, her brows slightly furrowed in concentration. The system notification chimed in my mind right on cue, Tactical Psychological Analysis Module activated. Target Maya Sterling. Micro-expression analysis indicates mild anxiety, extreme focus. Heart rate, 85 beats per minute. Visual focus, financial line charts on the screen. It seems that even a chaebol heiress has troubles that give her a headache. I steadied my breathing, put on an air of composure, pulled out the chair opposite her, and sat down without ceremony. If you're here to invite me to this weekend's bonfire party, or to borrow AP Calculus notes, the answer is no, Axel. Maya didn't even look up, her cold voice tinged with a hint of impatience. I'm not interested in those kinds of childish games. I leaned back against the chair, crossing my hands on the table. I'm guessing you're fretting over the risk assessment report for your family's planned acquisition of Oasis Tech. Maya's fingers tapping on the keyboard came to a sudden halt. She finally looked up, those sharp, sapphire-like eyes locking onto me, a flash of shock flickering within them. How do you know about this? This is a core trade secret of the Sterling Group. Even many of my father's senior executives are unaware of it. Her voice was kept very low, but her tone was laced with warning. Of course I knew. Because in my previous life, it was that bastard Silas who had secretly set the trap, intentionally leaking false market data. This led to the Sterling family discovering a massive financial black hole after acquiring Oasis Tech, leaving them severely weakened. This was also the crucial step that later allowed Silas to swallow the Sterling conglomerate. Don't be nervous, Maya. I'm not a corporate spy. I chuckled softly. At that moment, the system was frantically highlighting data vulnerabilities on her laptop screen across my retinas. I continued. I don't just know you're planning to acquire it. I also know that if you invest $50 million based on this current appraisal report, the Sterling family will be facing bankruptcy within 3 months. Axel, did you take the wrong medicine today? Do you have any idea what you're saying? Maya snapped her laptop shut, her gaze turning icy. If you're just talking nonsense to get my attention, I suggest you stop while you're ahead. Don't believe me? I leaned forward, looking her straight in the eyes, my tone devoid of any hint of a joke. Open the second page of your balance sheet. Look at that accounts receivable entry they made through the overseas shell company. Isn't the figure exactly the same as their R&D investment from last quarter? It's the most basic form of a circular accounting game. They've packaged debt as profit, just waiting for suckers like you who only look at financial statements to take the bait. Maya froze. She snapped open her laptop, her slender fingers sliding rapidly across the trackpad. As the data shifted on the screen, her originally flushed complexion turned pale, bit by bit. System prompt: target heart rate has spiked to 110 beats per minute. Intense emotional fluctuation detected. Assessment: shock and lingering fear. This is impossible. Our team of actuaries didn't even spot such a glaring loophole. Maya muttered to herself. When she looked up at me again, the arrogance from before had vanished, replaced by scrutiny and disbelief. Who exactly are you? Axel Reed, the invisible kid at school who always kept his head down. How could you possibly spot a high-level financial trap like this at a single glance? People change, Maya. I looked at her, my gaze deep and inscrutable. The blood feuds of my past life had long since stripped away any high school naivety. I'm just a bystander who doesn't want to see a great ship, meant to brave the winds and waves, sink because it struck a hidden reef. Besides, I have more information regarding the filth behind this acquisition, as well as the mastermind who is truly pulling the strings to devour your family. I deliberately dangled the clue about Silas, a bait I knew she could never refuse. Maya took a sharp breath, forcing herself to calm down. Brilliant as she was, she immediately grasped my intent. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Axel, what do you want? She regained her composure, crossing her arms and shifting into a negotiating stance. It's simple. I looked at her, enunciating every word. I need the Sterling family's resources and connections. In return, I will become your sharpest spear and your strongest shield. I want an alliance with you, Maya. Not the kind where high schoolers copy each other's homework, but a real alliance, one capable of whipping up a storm on Wall Street. The air seemed to freeze at that moment. Maya stared at me, seemingly reevaluating this classmate who felt both familiar and like a complete stranger. After a long silence, a dazzling smile suddenly broke across her stunning face. She extended her slender, fair hand and held it in midair. Deal, Axel. If you can truly help the Sterling family avoid this crisis, you will get exactly what you want. I held her hand, and the warmth radiating from her palm made me feel with absolute certainty that the gears of fate in this life had finally begun a frantic reversal under my control. The afternoon sun spilled blindingly across the turf at Oak Ridge High. Today was the open tryouts for the fall varsity football team, and the bleachers were packed with curious students, including Maya, who had just formed an alliance with me. Coach Davis, the PE teacher and head coach, blew a piercing whistle. All right, backups and freshmen, it's your turn for the rushing drills. The defense will be the varsity starters. I stood in the running back position, wearing a slightly loose white practice jersey. On the other side of the defensive line, Brody Carmichael, clad in full crimson heavy pads, was staring at me like a hungry hyena. The beating he took in the alley hadn't taught him a lesson. Instead, he saw this as the perfect revenge, wearing pads on the field to legitimately send me to the hospital. Ready for a wheelchair, Reed? Brody sneered cruelly at me through the iron bars of his helmet. The varsity linebackers flanking him erupted in unrestrained, mocking laughter. I ignored his shouting, calmly rotating my ankle to loosen it up. Tactical system initialized. The cold, mechanical voice arrived in my mind as expected. A pale blue holographic light screen instantly took over my vision. In my eyes, the entire field transformed into a precise sandbox filled with geometric lines. The friction coefficient of the turf, wind speed, the direction of muscle exertion from Brody and his lackeys, and the shifting angles of their centers of gravity, all of it turned into streams of data flickering frantically across my retinas. The highlighted red frame around Brody was the most glaring. The system had even thoughtfully marked the fatal flaw in his defensive footwork caused by his rage. Hike! The quarterback barked, tucking the brown football into my arms. Crush him! Brody let out a beast-like roar. Carrying nearly 250 pounds of terrifying weight, he charged toward me like an out-of-control heavy truck, flanked by 3 other varsity starters in a half-moon pincer formation. A collective gasp erupted from the stands. In the eyes of an ordinary person, facing these fully armored beasts without wearing heavy protective gear was nothing short of a suicide mission. But in my tactical vision, their movements were as slow as stop-motion animation. System prompt: left front target expected to dive tackle in 0.8 seconds. Right side target's center of gravity is too high. Brody Carmichael directly ahead is in a berserk sprint, unable to alter his inertial trajectory. Suggested route: change direction to the left, cut into the right side blind spot, and utilize the absolute inertia of the target ahead to evade and counterattack. My brain processed all the information in an instant. My body, honed through the hellish trials of my past life, achieved a perfect fusion with the system's micromanagement commands. The linebacker on the left, weighing over 200 pounds, lunged at me violently. Instead of slowing down, I charged half a step toward him. At the very moment he was about to brush against the edge of my jersey, my left foot dug hard into the turf, and my body executed an extreme change of direction to the right at an angle that utterly defied physical intuition. Thud! The linebacker on the left lunged and missed, slamming heavily onto the turf and catching a mouthful of mud. The defender on the right reached out, attempting to grab my jersey. My eyes sharpened as I dipped my shoulder slightly, my tactical vision pinpointing the blind spot in his wrist's leverage. I jerked my elbow upward, and his arm snapped back as if struck by an electric shock, leaving him stumbling backward as he lost his balance. In less than 2 seconds I had sliced through the once seamless double team like a surgical scalpel, carving out a wide-open gap. Now, only Brody stood directly in front of me. His bloodshot eyes widened, clearly caught off guard by the fact that I had breached the first line of defense unscathed. With less than 3 meters between us, he gritted his teeth and lowered his center of gravity, preparing to utterly crush me with his signature death charge. Tactical prediction: target will initiate a low-profile tackle. Micromaneuver suggestion: 360-degree spin move, combined with a manual push-off for leverage. I took a deep breath. A mere 0.1 seconds before Brody's body could slam into my midsection like a cannonball, I drove my right foot into the turf like a stake. Using it as a pivot, my entire body whipped around like a sudden hurricane. Brody's helmet grazed past my waist, leaving a violent gust of wind in its wake. The moment I turned my back to him, my right hand pressed with pinpoint precision against the pressure point on the side of his helmet. I didn't use much strength. I simply followed the momentum of his unstoppable sprint, like a Tai Chi push, using his own force against him to give him a fierce shove forward. Boom! Due to his excessive speed and the complete loss of his target, Brody was unable to break under the massive inertia. Like an uncontrolled bowling ball, he crashed directly into his 2 other teammates who had just scrambled up from the ground. The 3 heavily armed bruisers instantly tumbled into a heap, their heavy protective gear colliding with a loud, dull thud, a scene that was utterly comical and pathetic. Meanwhile, I had already crossed the touchdown line with a relaxed, leisurely stride, casually tossing the football onto the turf. The entire field fell into a deathly silence. Coach Davis's whistle dropped from his mouth to the ground, and the students in the stands seemed to have been collectively muted. Everyone stared wide-eyed at this utterly incredible scene on the field. It took a full 5 seconds before the stands suddenly erupted into a deafening roar of gasps and whistles. I turned around and looked down at Brody, who was lying on the ground with his helmet knocked askew, seeing stars from the violent impact. His flushed face was a mask of humiliation, daze, and utter disbelief. I walked slowly over to him, looking down from above, and said coldly in a voice only the 2 of us could hear. I warned you, Brody. I told you that if you dared to mess with me again, it wouldn't just be your pride that got shattered. It seems your brain really doesn't match your size. Brody shuddered, a humiliated grunt catching in his throat, unable to utter a single word of rebuttal. He finally understood that the Reed who once allowed himself to be bullied had transformed into an absolute crusher, someone he could never understand, let alone defeat. I ignored the defeated man on the ground and walked straight toward the sidelines. Maya was watching me from the stands, a slight curve at the corners of her mouth, her sapphire-like eyes shimmering with undisguised admiration. Establishing dominance in the arena was only the first step of my return to the peak. Silas, keep your eyes wide open. This hunting game has only just begun. Taking down Brody and making a name for myself at school was merely an appetizer for my comeback. To truly topple Silas Montgomery in this dog-eat-dog world, fists alone would be far from enough. My true battlefield lay in Wall Street, in that bottomless abyss constructed of strings of cold numbers and endless greed. And my most urgent priority now was to stockpile my first batch of heavy ammunition, capital. Late at night, I sat at my bedroom desk, with only the laptop screen emitting a faint blue glow in the darkness. System, initiate the deep data mining module. Target, all hidden accounts under the name of Silas Montgomery, as well as recent equity changes in Starry Sky Tech. I commanded in my mind. In my previous life, the reason Silas was able to rise so rapidly as a mere high schooler was that he completed a bargain hunt. At this very moment, that could only be described as a miracle. At the time, a local drone R&D company called Starry Sky Tech was on the brink of bankruptcy, its stock price having plummeted to rock bottom. Everyone assumed it was a junk company about to be delisted. However, no one knew that on the eve of its bankruptcy, Starry Sky Tech's core team had already achieved a breakthrough in the lab regarding an extremely critical micro-hovering patent. Silas had used his family's secret channels to learn of this insider information in advance, deploying funds to frantically accumulate shares in the shadows, buying up 80% of Starry Sky Tech's circulating stock at a rock-bottom price. A week later, a Silicon Valley giant acquired Starry Sky Tech in a massive all-cash deal. Silas's assets decupled overnight, netting him a cool $15 million. This sum became the cornerstone upon which he would later build his $100 billion financial empire. But in this life, that stepping stone belongs to me. A pale blue holographic screen rapidly unfurled across my retina, with streams of data cascading down like a waterfall. The system's computing power far exceeded any supercomputer of this era. In just 3 minutes, the system locked onto Silas's proxy account. System prompt: detected target account setting up covert quantitative buy orders at 50 cents per share. Final liquidation style sweep is expected to be completed tomorrow at 2:50 p.m. I let out a cold sneer. Silas was a man defined by extreme arrogance and caution to his very core. He always favored a lightning strike in the final 10 minutes before the market closed, leaving no one any time to react. Unfortunately for him, he was facing someone who had crawled back from the depths of hell. At noon the following day, I pushed open the door to a private booth in an upscale cafe in Lower Manhattan. Maya Sterling was elegantly stirring her black tea. Seeing me enter, she arched an eyebrow. "Axel, I hope you didn't ask me out just to brag about how impressive you were on the football field yesterday. A sport for the muscle-bound and simple-minded isn't worth bragging about." I pulled out a chair and sat down, cutting straight to the chase. "Maya, I need your help. I want to borrow a high-level secret trading account from the Sterling family, along with $1 million in available funds." Maya stopped stirring her black tea. She looked up, a hint of scrutiny in her eyes. $1 million? Axel, although we have formed an alliance and you have proven your vision, that doesn't mean I'm going to blindly throw money down the drain. Give me a reason." I was well prepared and pushed a stack of printed documents toward her. "Starry Sky Tech?" Maya glanced at the name on the file, her brow furrowing slightly. "This company has suffered losses for 3 consecutive quarters and is facing bankruptcy liquidation at any moment. Its stock is currently worth less than scrap paper. That's the common perspective." I looked at her with confidence. Turn to page 3. These are flight records and patent office filings I tracked through special channels. The CEO of that Silicon Valley tech giant has had his private jet land secretly at our local private airport 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Starry Sky Tech's laboratory just submitted an encrypted patent application last week. Maya was incredibly sharp. She quickly connected these seemingly unrelated clues, a glimmer of disbelief flashing in her eyes. "You mean the giant is going to acquire this bankrupt company?" "It's not that they're going to. It's already a done deal." I leaned back in my chair, my tone certain. "Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp, the acquisition announcement will be released. But right now, someone is trying to quietly swallow all the chips before the market closes. Maya, if you believe me, this isn't just my million, it's also a perfect opportunity for the Sterling family to test the waters." Maya stared at me for a full 10 seconds. In this boy of her own age, she saw a depth and coldness that didn't belong to his years. That all-controlling confidence even caused her heart to skip a beat. "Fine." She decisively pulled out her phone and dialed the family's CFO. "In 2 minutes, the account details and permissions will be sent to your phone. Axel, show me what you're truly capable of." 2:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the stock market closes. I sat before the trading terminal, my eyes locked onto the lifeless K-line chart of Starry Sky Tech. The tactical system had fully taken over the information flow of the trading interface. System alert: Silas's proxy accounts have begun their move. Large buy orders are being placed in an attempt to lock the price at the limit by 2:50 p.m. Trying to take it all for yourself? In your dreams. My hands flew across the keyboard. 2:49. Just a second before Silas's agent was about to hit the final confirmation key, I unhesitatingly split that $1 million fund into hundreds of highly concealed quantitative sweeping programs. With a razor-thin advantage of $0.55 per share, I instantly devoured every single retail order and institutional base position on the market like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves. Beep! A crisp transaction notification echoed inside the private box. $1 million fully invested, transaction complete. The system's light screen displayed the data fluctuations of Silas's proxy account. Because I had instantly hollowed out the underlying assets, his trading program suffered a brief crash, followed by a continuous stream of buy-order withdrawal notifications. I shut down my computer, took a sip of the stone-cold coffee on the desk, and a cold, sharp curve traced my lips. Early the next morning, the financial world's bombshell detonated as expected. A Silicon Valley giant announced a full acquisition of Starry Sky Tech's patents and team at a staggering premium. At the opening bell, Starry Sky Tech's stock price shot up like a rocket, soaring a full 15-fold instantly. My account balance transformed from $1 million directly into a staggering $15 million. At this very moment, in a luxury penthouse on the other side of Manhattan, Silas Montgomery stared at the skyrocketing stock price on his screen and his own empty account. He slammed his custom-made tumbler against the wall, shattering it as his handsome face twisted into a mask of rage. The initial exploration of capital has come to a perfect conclusion. Silas, the era that belongs to you has already been torn open by me, unknowingly, with an unhealable rift. This is only the beginning. In the grand ballroom on the top floor of the Waldorf Astoria, a massive Swarovski crystal chandelier illuminated the entire space as bright as day. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the mellow aroma of premium champagne. This was the social arena at the pinnacle of New York's pyramid. Tonight's top-tier business networking gala gathered the capital giants who controlled the city's economic lifeblood. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, slightly adjusting my deep black suit, handcrafted by a Savile Row bespoke tailor. Just yesterday, $15 million in cash had landed in my account, money that was not only the capital for my revenge but also my ticket into this social class. You look much better in a suit than you do on the football field. Maya walked up to me holding 2 glasses of champagne, handing me one. Tonight she wore a deep sapphire blue evening gown, looking incomparably noble. Are you ready? There are no referees here tonight, only wolves who will strip you to the bone. There always has to be a lion in a pack of wolves, doesn't there? I said, taking the glass. My gaze swept across the crowd, instantly locking onto the young figure surrounded by people in the center of the hall. Silas Montgomery. Dressed in an incredibly flamboyant white tuxedo, he held a wine glass, effortlessly conversing and laughing with several veteran Wall Street fund managers. Although intercepting Starry Sky Tech had cost him a massive potential windfall, the Montgomery family's deep-rooted influence still allowed him to move through this environment like a fish in water. Before long, Silas noticed Maya. His eyes lit up, and he walked straight toward us, glass in hand. But when he saw clearly that I was the one standing beside her, his perfect aristocratic smile froze instantly. A flash of utter shock crossed his eyes, followed by a barely perceptible trace of malice. Good evening, Maya. Silas quickly masked his emotions, adopting a condescending posture as his contemptuous gaze fell upon me. Am I seeing things? Isn't this Axel, the poor kid from our school who has to budget every cent for lunch? What's the matter? Does the Waldorf Astoria allow part-time waiters to go without uniforms now? The group of wealthy heirs following Silas immediately erupted into harsh, mocking laughter. Maya's expression turned cold, and she was about to speak, but I reached out and gently stopped her. Facing Silas's provocation, I didn't even lift an eyelid, merely taking a calm sip of champagne. Silas, I heard you were sniped by a mysterious buyer while trying to build a position in the stock market a couple of days ago. Not only did you fail to make a profit, but you even lost money on transaction fees due to your own blunders. It seems the young master of the Montgomery family has a sharp tongue, but his actual vision is quite mediocre. These words struck Silas exactly where it hurt. His expression darkened instantly, the veins on his forehead throbbing slightly. He never could have imagined that the mysterious buyer who had caused him to lose face was the very poor boy standing right in front of him. But he was, after all, a calculating viper. He took a deep breath to suppress his rage and sneered. A sharp tongue doesn't change the fact that you're nothing but bottom-tier trash. However, I'm in a good mood today, so I won't stoop to your level. Because next, I am going to announce a grand project to everyone here that is enough to reshape the energy landscape. With that, Silas turned and walked toward the podium in the center of the ballroom. The lights in the hall dimmed accordingly, and a single spotlight fell upon him. Distinguished seniors, ladies and gentlemen. Silas regained his confident, hypocritical smile. The Montgomery family has recently discovered a deep-sea cold-seep lithium belt with staggering reserves off the coast of South America. We have established the Deep Blue Energy Special Fund. Exploration is now complete, and tonight, I would like to invite everyone here, especially Mr. Sterling, to co-invest $50 million to jointly develop this blue ocean. A murmur rippled through the banquet hall. Maya's father, Arthur Sterling, the helm of the Sterling conglomerate, nodded slightly, appearing quite interested in the project. In my previous life, this so-called Deep Blue Energy was a complete Ponzi scheme. Silas had used forged exploration reports to swindle massive investments, eventually absconding with the funds and leaving several major conglomerates, including the Sterling family, with devastating losses. On my retina, the tactical system instantly entered an overclocked state. System prompt, initiating global data cross-reference. Target, Deep Blue Energy. Analysis results. The registration number for the South American exploration vessel associated with this project is a ghost number. The geological profile displayed has a 98% correlation with a discarded academic paper from 10 years ago. The legal representative of its offshore shell company is a distant relative of the Montgomery family's private driver. Conclusion: Level 1 commercial fraud. Watching Arthur Sterling prepare to raise his hand to signal his investment intent, I set down my wine glass and took 2 steps forward without hesitation. My clear voice rang out through the quiet banquet hall like a sudden clap of thunder. Wait a moment, Mr. Sterling. I suggest you put your checkbook away. Because the young Master Montgomery standing on that stage is currently trying to swindle $50 million out of your pocket using a pile of scrap paper. The room erupted in an uproar. Every gaze in the hall instantly converged on me. Arthur Sterling frowned, while Silas, standing on the stage, jumped as if someone had stepped on his tail. Axel! Have you lost your mind? Where is security? Get this rambling lunatic out of here! Silas roared in desperation, but the system clearly captured his heart rate skyrocketing and his pupils constricting violently, the unmistakable signs of extreme guilt. What? Are you in such a hurry to kick me out because you've been exposed? I looked at him coldly, walking toward the podium step by step, dropping a bombshell with every stride. Silas, that Poseidon exploration vessel you claim is operating in South America was actually dismantled and sold for scrap metal in Norway 3 years ago. And this top-secret geological report you're displaying on the big screen, isn't it just a direct copy-paste from a rejected thesis at Moscow University 10 years ago? You didn't even bother to fix the typo on the 3rd line of the 4th page. I didn't speak fast, but every word cut deep. The air in the banquet hall seemed to freeze. Several senior investment moguls immediately pulled out their phones, instructing their teams to conduct a rapid verification. This is slander. My shell. No, my offshore company's paperwork is all in order. Silas's voice began to tremble, and fine beads of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Oh, the paperwork is very much in order. I stopped in my tracks and stared at him coldly. This shell company registered in the Cayman Islands has a legal representative named Juan Lopez. If I recall correctly, that's your family's old driver's nephew. Using your own driver's relative as a front, the Montgomery family's methods are truly primitive. With a loud boom, the banquet hall erupted into total chaos. The investors, who had previously been extremely interested in the project, now turned their gazes towards Silas, filled with hostility and disdain. In less than 3 minutes, Arthur Sterling's assistant whispered a few words into his ear. The business tycoon's face instantly turned ashen. He slammed his wine glass down on the table, shot Silas a cold glare, and turned to leave the venue immediately. With his lies completely torn to shreds, Silas slumped on the stage like a deflated balloon. His meticulously groomed hair was now a disheveled mess, making him look exactly like a pathetic clown. He stared fixedly at me, his eyes brimming with terror and disbelief. I looked away with disdain and turned back to Maya's side. This was merely a small gift I had prepared for Silas. The true despair was yet to come. It was deep into the night by the time I left the Waldorf Astoria. With that $15 million windfall, I had casually picked up a heavily modified black Ford Mustang. Now, the low rumble of the V8 engine echoed across the deserted Long Island coastal highway. The sea breeze rushed in through the half-lowered window, yet it failed to disperse the approaching scent of killing intent in the air. The crushing defeat at the gala had clearly shattered Silas Montgomery's sanity. The noble scion, who always prided himself on his elegance, had finally torn off his mask of hypocrisy to reveal his desperate, snarling fangs. System warning, high-risk tailing targets detected. 2 heavy-duty SUVs without license plates are approaching rapidly. Physical collision expected in 10 seconds. The cold, mechanical voice in my mind had barely faded when blinding high beams suddenly flared in the rearview mirror. Two all-black Chevrolet Suburbans, resembling steel behemoths, roared toward me like streaks of black lightning under the cover of night. My eyes sharpened as I slammed my foot onto the accelerator. The Mustang's tachometer surged instantly, and the intense G-force pinned me firmly against the seat. However, the opposition was clearly a team of professional hitmen who had come prepared. The SUV on my left, relying on its terrifying horsepower, forced its way into my passing lane, attempting to use its heavy chassis to ram me toward the steep coastal cliffs on the right. Bang! A muffled gunshot was drowned out by the roar of the engines, but the side view mirror on my passenger side instantly shattered into a cloud of glass fragments. They were actually using suppressed firearms. Silas was acting out of desperation, determined to completely eliminate me, the greatest variable in his eyes, once and for all tonight. Warning: survival rate with conventional driving techniques is below 3%. Once the rear left tire is hit, the vehicle will lose control and roll at a speed of 120 miles per hour. The system stated the fatal reality without a trace of emotion. Two heavy-duty off-road vehicles had already boxed me into a blind spot. Dark barrels emerged once again from the rear windows, their black muzzles pointing directly at my driver's seat. Life and death hung by a thread. System, lift all safety restrictions. Initiate overload mode. I gritted my teeth and issued the ultimate command in my mind. Command confirmed. Overload mode activated. Warning: this mode will place an extreme load on the host's nervous system. Maximum duration must not exceed 3 minutes. Before the voice could even fade, the pale blue holographic screen on my retina instantly transformed into a blinding crimson. The entire world underwent a cataclysmic shift in my perception, as if time had been forcibly slowed down several times over. Everything around me, the flow of the sea breeze, the friction coefficient between the tires and the asphalt, the micro-movements of the assassin's muscles as he pulled the trigger behind me, all turned into a massive torrent of red data, surging frantically into my brain. A sharp, stabbing pain radiated from my temples, the burden of my brain running in an overclock state, but it was accompanied by a sense of absolute power, as if I were in control of everything. Micro-operation takeover. Predicting ballistic trajectory, 45 degrees to the rear right. Evasive maneuver, sharp turn of the steering wheel 15 degrees to the left, while simultaneously tapping the brakes. 0.01 seconds before the muzzle spat fire, my hands, acting like high-precision robotic arms, executed the system's commands with absolute accuracy. The Mustang's chassis shuddered violently at high speed, followed by an incredible lateral drift to the left. Swoosh! A large-caliber bullet grazed my taillight, striking a long trail of dazzling sparks across the asphalt surface. The assassins clearly hadn't expected me to evade a lethal shot in such a desperate situation. That brief moment of shock caused a slight flaw to appear in their pincer formation. Now's the time. A ruthless glint flashed in my eyes. Instead of continuing to flee, I slammed on the handbrake and whipped the steering wheel hard to the right. The Mustang let out an ear-piercing screech as the tires tore against the asphalt. At a high speed of 100 miles per hour, the entire chassis completed a death-defying drift turn, pointing the nose of the car directly at the SUV on the left that had been trying to ram me. In overload mode, the opponent's center of gravity and chassis weaknesses were laid bare within my crimson field of vision. I released the handbrake and floored the accelerator. The Mustang, like a man in Black Panther, charged head-on toward the SUV. He's insane! The opposing driver's eyes widened in terror as he instinctively jerked the wheel to evade. But this was exactly the reaction the system had precisely calculated. At the very instant the heavy SUV's left wheels lifted slightly off the ground due to a sharp turn, I steered my Mustang at an incredibly sharp angle, slamming it violently into the SUV's right rear wheel bearing. Boom! Using its own momentum against it, the most lethal principles of leverage and physics were pushed to their absolute limit at that moment. Under the force of massive inertia and the precision of the impact point, the 3-ton SUV instantly lost its balance. Like a clumsy tin can, it rolled 3 or 4 times consecutively across the highway before finally smashing through the guardrail and flipping into the roadside ditch, billowing thick clouds of smoke. One down. There was still a minute and a half left in overload mode, but the stinging sensation in my brain was already as sharp and intense as needles. Seeing this, the remaining SUV on the right didn't slow down. Instead, as if driven to madness, it switched on all its high beams in an attempt to blind me, charging toward me at full speed. Ahead lies a lethal hairpin turn approaching 90 degrees, with a solid mountain wall on one side and a precipitous cliff overlooking turbulent waters on the other. System, calculate the optimal escape trajectory and the enemy's critical point for falling off the cliff. Calculation complete. At 50 meters from the curve, increase speed to 130 miles per hour and cut into the inner drainage ditch to perform a wall hook turn. It was an utterly insane tactic. Enduring a splitting headache that felt as if my brain were about to explode, I floored the accelerator. 110 miles per hour, 120 miles per hour, 130 miles per hour. The off-road vehicle behind was hot on my heels, the gap between the two cars closing to less than 2 meters. 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters. At the very instant we were about to slam into the mountain wall, I violently jerked the steering wheel inward. The Mustang's right front and rear wheels locked precisely into the roadside drainage ditch, using the edge of the trench as a fulcrum to counteract the massive centrifugal force. Hugging the mountain wall, the car body carved a perfect arc through the hairpin turn at an impossibly high speed that defied all logic. The driver of the off-road vehicle tailing me had no time to react. His heavy chassis completely lost grip at a high speed of 130 miles per hour. He slammed on the brakes in desperation, but in the face of such powerful inertia, all effort was futile. Accompanied by the screeching of brakes and desperate screams, the black SUV, like a kite with a severed string, smashed straight through the guardrail at the cliff's edge and plunged into the pitch-black sea, without kicking up so much as a single wave. Danger neutralized. Overload mode deactivated. The crimson before my eyes faded, returning to the normal hues of the night. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, gasping for air, my shirt completely soaked through with sweat. A wave of mental exhaustion washed over me, but the coldness in my eyes was even more biting than the night wind of Long Island. I took out my phone and dialed Maya's number. The phone was picked up after just 2 rings. Staring into the darkness over the distant sea, my voice was as cold as ice from the depths of hell. Maya, track Silas's financial movements tonight. The business games are over. Since he wants to play with lives, I'll play with him to the bitter end. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting dappled shadows across the carpet. Inside the Sterling family's private trading room in Midtown Manhattan, the atmospheric pressure was low enough to be suffocating. I sat before the multi-screen trading terminal, the collar of my shirt still stained with a few drops of blood from the previous night, yet this did not affect the stability of my keystrokes in the slightest. Maya walked in carrying 2 cups of black coffee. Seeing me in this state, a flash of irrepressible shock and awe crossed her eyes. She already knew about the desperate chase on the Long Island highway last night, but she never imagined a high school student could emerge unscathed from an ambush by 2 professional assassins, let alone kill them. Axel, you're a complete lunatic. Maya handed me the coffee and took a deep breath. I checked. Silas used a secret offshore account belonging to the Montgomery family to pay the bounty. What do you plan to do? Call the police? Calling the police is far too easy on him. I took a sip of the coffee. The bitter liquid made my exhausted brain cold and clear once again. I want him, and the entire Montgomery family, to watch with their own eyes as the empire they take such pride in turns to ash. From the financial to the physical level, I will leave nothing standing. In the memories of my past life, the Montgomery family appeared to be glamorous investment giants on the surface, but the true core cash flow of the family originated from their wholly owned subsidiary, Ocean Behemoth, Shipping and Logistics. This company had been secretly engaged in extremely filthy smuggling operations, involving not only contraband but also massive quantities of smuggled raw ores from South America. In my previous life, this secret wasn't accidentally uncovered by the FBI until 5 years later, causing the Montgomery family to collapse overnight. Since Silas is in such a hurry to seek death, I'll move that timeline forward by 5 years. System, perform a deep hack into the internal servers of Ocean Behemoth Shipping. I issued the command in my mind. Target, locate the real inbound and outbound logs for warehouse No. 10, as well as all hidden offshore hedge debts. Cracking firewall. Crack successful. Data extraction complete. A pale blue holographic screen rapidly unfolded before my eyes. The system's immense computing power tore through the Montgomery family's highest-level network defenses like a hot knife through butter. In just 2 minutes, hundreds of pages of smuggling ledges, bribery lists, and data on hidden leverage debts totaling 200 million were all packaged and downloaded. I slid an encrypted USB drive toward Maya, a cold glint flashing in my eyes like a hunter closing the net. Inside this is complete evidence of smuggling by the Montgomery family's shipping companies, along with hard proof of them forging financial statements to cover their deficits. Maya, leverage the Sterling family's political resources and send these documents anonymously to the Federal Customs Smuggling Investigation Bureau and the SEC immediately. Maya stared at the black USB drive, instantly grasping my plan, and let out a sharp intake of breath. You want to strangle them in the legal system and the capital markets at the same time? That's right. I turned my gaze toward the stock market ticker on the screen. Not only that, but I'm going to drain every last drop of their blood. Transfer the entire 15 million from my account into the options account and go all in on Ocean Behemoth put options. 10 times leverage. At 9:30 a.m., the opening bell of Wall Street rang right on time. Maya and I stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city where money never sleeps. 9:45 a.m. The strike on the physical level arrived first. Pier 4 of New York Harbor, the Montgomery family's proudest logistics hub. Dozens of black armored vehicles with flashing red and blue police lights descended like divine soldiers, crashing directly through the defensive lines. Fully armed federal agents and customs enforcement officers cordoned off the entire port, seizing 3 giant cargo ships that had just docked and uncovering tens of millions of dollars worth of contraband. Simultaneously, Warehouse 10 was forcibly breached, exposing mountains of smuggled raw ore to the light of day. The physical industries that the Montgomery family took such pride in were physically uprooted and completely paralyzed within a mere half hour. At exactly 10 o'clock, the financial destruction arrived as scheduled. As news of the port seizure spread across Wall Street within minutes, the Securities and Exchange Commission simultaneously released an announcement of a formal investigation into the Montgomery family for suspected financial fraud totaling $200 million. The stock price of the Ocean Behemoth traced a shocking, cliff-like waterfall across the screen. 10%, 30%, 60%. Trading was halted 3 times by circuit breakers, but each time it resumed, it was met with an even more frenzied wave of selling. The Wall Street capital firms that once called Silas brother were now running faster than anyone else, their countless sell orders smashing the Montgomery family's stock into worthless scrap paper. Transaction complete. All put options have been closed. The system's notification echoed in his mind. I glanced at my account balance. That staggering plunge, amplified by tenfold leverage, had allowed me to rake in a staggering $120 million in just 1 hour. At this very moment, inside the Montgomery family's luxury manor, there was a deathly silence. Silas's eyes were bloodshot as he stared intently at the breaking news scrolling across the television screen. The collapse of the Montgomery Consortium. His hands trembled as he reached for the wine glass on the table, but with a thud, he knocked it over onto the expensive carpet, the liquid spreading like pools of crimson blood. Bang! The manor's front doors were violently burst open, and a team of federal agents rushed into the living room with guns drawn. Silas Montgomery, you are under arrest for suspicion of commercial fraud, contract killing, and transnational smuggling. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The lead agent coldly recited the Miranda warning as the icy handcuffs snapped shut around Silas's once pampered wrists. The moment he was escorted out the door, Silas seemed to have a sudden realization. He whipped his head around, letting out a desperate and shrill roar into the air. Axel! It was you! It was definitely you! In the trading room, I switched off the television screen and drained the last sip of coffee from my cup. A thunderous counterattack, a fallen tycoon. Silas was out. But this was merely the first stepping stone on my journey back to the pinnacle of Wall Street. In this world fueled by greed and betrayal, the real hunt has only just begun. 3 months might seem like just a seasonal change to the average person, but on Wall Street, it is enough time to witness the fall of an old empire and the rise of a new dynasty. The bankruptcy liquidation proceedings for the Montgomery family were officially completed last week. Silas, once so arrogant and invincible, faced multiple felony charges including international smuggling, contract killing, and commercial fraud. He was ultimately sentenced by the federal court to 120 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He will spend the dark remainder of his life in a maximum security prison in Colorado. As for me, I have completed the absolute primitive accumulation of capital by stepping over the bones of the Montgomery family. The $120 million I raked in during the short-selling campaign became the fulcrum with which I moved the entire world. After founding Genesis Capital, I relied on the absolute computing power granted by the system and my precise memories of financial cycles from my past life to sweep through the global futures and foreign exchange markets over the next 3 months as if entering an uninhabited land. From accurately longing new energy tech stocks in Silicon Valley to shorting subprime foreign exchange assets in South America, every move was a textbook stroke of genius. Today, the assets under the actual control of Genesis Capital have surpassed $10 billion, making it the hottest top-tier financial conglomerate on Wall Street. 74 Wall Street, once the headquarters of the Montgomery family, now saw the emblem atop the building completely dismantled, replaced by the sharp, dark gold lettering of Genesis Capital. As night fell, the neon lights of Manhattan flowed like liquid gold, surging through the city's veins of steel and concrete. I stood before the panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse executive office, looking down at the jungle of steel that symbolized global wealth and power. The walnut double doors of the office were pushed open softly. Maya walked in with a graceful sway, wearing a perfectly tailored, deep black haute couture evening gown. In her hands she carried 2 glasses of Macallan vintage whiskey, the ice cubes clinking crisply against the amber liquid. As the heiress to the Sterling conglomerate, she never needed to depend on anyone. Yet, over the past 3 months, she had not only deeply bound the Sterling family's core resources to mine but had also personally witnessed my transformation from a helpless avenger into a man ascending, step by step, to the pinnacle of world power. I just received word from inside Capitol Hill. The bill to deregulate deep-sea mineral mining has passed its final review. Maya stepped up beside me and handed me one of the glasses of whiskey, her eyes shimmering with a captivating glow. This means the valuation of those secret blocks we pre-positioned in the Atlantic will at least triple by tomorrow morning. Axel, you've won again. It's not just me who won. We won. I took the glass and lightly tapped it against hers, producing a crisp clink. Maya let out a soft laugh and turned to look at the dazzling night view outside the window. To be honest, if I hadn't experienced it myself, I'd truly think I was in the middle of a fever dream. 3 months ago, Silas publicly mocked you at the Waldorf Astoria for being a penniless kid from the bottom. 3 months later, you're standing at the highest point of this skyscraper, holding the survival of countless families in your hands. Sometimes I even wonder, are you a demon with the power of foresight, or the true god of Wall Street? I took a sip of the whiskey, the rich aroma spreading through my mouth. I didn't answer her question directly, because some secrets will forever be locked away within the system code in the deepest recesses of my mind. At that moment, the tactical light screen on my retina automatically lit up, with ghostly blue text refreshing rapidly like a waterfall. System prompt: the host's personal assets have surpassed the 10 billion mark. Social influence rating has reached the maximum level. Phase-specific main quest revenge and counterattack has been fully completed. Core permissions unlocked, global macro market deduction mode activated. Alarm cleared. Detecting that the host has reached the pinnacle of regional power, the system will now enter a high-dimensional silent auxiliary state. Wishing you prosperity and victory in the new era, my king. Looking at that final line, a cold arc curled at the corners of my mouth. The total annihilation of my enemies was always just an appetizer. With this hyperdimensional system capable of insight into the global economic lifeblood, every inch of wealth and territory on this planet would become a chessboard for my casual maneuvers. What are you thinking about? Maya asked curiously, sensing the slight ripple in my emotions. I'm wondering what kind of headlines the Wall Street Journal will use to report on us tomorrow morning. I turned my head, my deep gaze meeting her beautiful eyes. The Sterling Consortium is now the largest global partner of Genesis Capital. Maya, are you ready to welcome an era that truly belongs to us? Maya was momentarily taken aback, but then a dazzling and ambitious smile broke across her face. She raised her crystal wine glass, leaning in close to mine. Of course. It would be my honor, Axel. The night wind swept across the city skyline, brushing against the high-altitude glass curtain walls. Below, Wall Street remained brightly lit, with countless top traders frantically preparing for tomorrow's opening bell. Meanwhile, those once lofty titans of old capital must now learn to maintain a sense of awe and look up from within the shadow of Genesis Capital. I tilted my head back and drained the strong spirits in my glass in a single gulp. The view from the top of the world is cold and captivating. The old Zaibatsus have scattered like dust in the winds of history, and here, at the highest point of this city, I have officially donned my invisible crown. A new era begins now. The end. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.